My name is Luke Nathan Phillips, and I am running to be the next congressman from Virginia's 8th Congressional District.
I initially piqued your interest in politics.
Every politician you ever talk to will say something along the lines of, "We talked about it around the dinner table." And that's more or less true with me and my family. I grew up in a very public service oriented family. My dad was in the Navy. My mom was an immigrant from the Philippines who, like a lot of immigrants from the Philippines, became incredibly patriotic right up. And so, followed a lot of politics. I don't really agree with many of the politics that I grew up with anymore, I think. But that started off my process of learning as much as I could about what mattered to people back in the mid 2000s when I was growing up. And over the last, I think, 15 years, it has just been a really long adventure finding out more and more and more about stuff. I guess the other thing, too, is that I spent a lot of time in the past. I love history. You might be able to tell a little bit of that on some of the things on my wall in my desk. And I am just always so fascinated how the great movements and the great institutions and the great figures of the past dealt with really, really important moral struggles and just times to build new things in the world. I'm just always fascinated in reading their stories, reading their histories. Anybody who does that long enough eventually will develop a couple political heroes. And in this 250th anniversary of the United States of America, I know that now is a good time to start thinking about your political heroes as much as any time.
Who are some of your political heroes?
Well, there's a lot of them that are dead, and there's a couple of them that are alive. The single two most important ones who have influenced my thinking on life and my thinking on politics and my thinking on America are Alexander Hamilton, first Secretary of the Treasury, and Theodore Roosevelt, 26th President of the United States, and one of the great conservationists of the 21st century. My three biggest political heroes of our own time are John McCain, the 2008 presidential nominee and one of the last great American heroes. Robert Gates, the Secretary of Defense under both President George W. Bush and President Barack Obama. And John Huntsman Jr., former governor of Utah, but the ambassador to China under President Barack Obama and the ambassador to Russia under President Donald Trump. The reason they inspire me is because they held to an old bipartisan tradition of leadership in public service, most importantly in foreign policy, but also in the way we do our domestic politics. There's a kind of dignity and pragmatism in that I think has always been one of the best things that we could have in American politics. It's simultaneously bipartisan and independent, if you know what I mean. And I think that's what the Republican Party has been at its best. And I aspire to do my best to live up to that in my own life.
You're an Alexander Hamilton reenactor. How did that happen?
Well, it's a long story, but the easiest way to put it is a friend of mine who knew me through a couple other worlds told me that her organization, the Daughters of the American Revolution Virginia chapter, was doing something called the Patriots and Petticoats Ball, where a bunch of old people dressed as the founding fathers would go hang out with a bunch of old people not dressed as the founding fathers and celebrate the 250th anniversary of the United States of America that way. I was piqued by this, and I've always wanted to do some kind of reenacting stuff myself, just of how much time I spent in the past. So I asked her, "Are you guys looking for more reenactors?" And she said, "Oh my gosh, you would be a great reenactor." And so I volunteered. I ordered a cheap Continental Army officer's uniform on Amazon and got a pair of black shoes and pulled up some white gym socks long enough to look like leggings. Although actually that's not what the Continental Army officer uniform was, which is important. So then I went to the ball, spent a lot of time being charming to old ladies and learning how to do colonial dance and talking to people about political theory and how governments can and can't work and how the understanding of human nature of the 18th century was incredibly important in thinking about the first party system and thinking about the Constitution. Stuff that I spend my time thinking about anyway, and stuff that in this case, I got to talk about it not as somebody who studies it, but as somebody who made it, as Alexander Hamilton. And that actually was a really profound experience for me because it was a reminder that the same issues that we have now, refracted and like remixed in a lot of ways, are the same issues that Americans have dealt with every decade of our national life for the last 250 years. There's a lot of wisdom you can find in the past. You can't just copy it. We live in our own times, not Alexander Hamilton's times. But there's a way that if you look deep enough into history, you can find some creative ways to think about things and then be creative yourself.
You graduated from the University of Southern California with a BA in International Relations and Affairs. What drew you to that major as opposed to like poli-sci or econ?
Back when I first got into college, I was trying to go on an ROTC scholarship for various reasons. Unfortunately, that didn't work out, but I still wanted to find some way to serve my country. And so I immediately thought, well, if I can't be in the Navy, maybe I could be one of these badasses in the CIA who speaks 7 languages and has a girlfriend in every country and does all this James Bond stuff, right? So I applied to the CIA internship, never heard back on that. But I also, at the meantime, was thinking it would be cool to go work in the State Department and be a foreign service officer and get to go live abroad everywhere. So I took the foreign service officer test and passed a couple times. And they happened to be the years that the State Department wasn't hiring, unfortunately. And I guess my idea of what politics and public service meant at that point had nothing to do with domestic politics and had everything to do with foreign policy and the kind of nonpartisan foreign policy public servant tradition. Studied international relations. A couple writers who had influenced me pretty strongly at that point were international relations scholars. Also, the international relations department at USC at that time was just way more interesting than the poli-sci department. So I studied it, read Machiavelli and Thomas Hobbes and everybody. Who everybody reads for IR, tried to learn languages, failed Chinese 4 times. But yeah, I really wanted to do that because I thought that working abroad for America, working to advance American foreign policy, and like doing the grand strategist thing, like being somebody's Henry Kissinger, being somebody's Brent Scowcroft, would be a way I could like give back. Over time, I felt drawn closer and closer to domestic politics and policy. I'm a Republican. Living in California as a Republican in 2016 is a very unique experience. It is also an experience where you can like get surprisingly high in anybody's campaign if you want, because everybody in California Republican politics needs more bodies, and it's a place to go learn a lot on that. And I think slowly, even though my mind was originally formed by international relations, and it still is, I realized that what I wanted to do with my life was actually much, much, much more close to American economic policy, American social policy, and especially like just the politics of how our political parties are shaped and what they should be and what they should stand for.
You were a campaign assistant for, I think, Duff Sondheim? Is that how you say his name?
Sondheim. Duff Sondheim, yeah. Great man, great American.
And you were also an editorial intern during that time. So when you graduated college, what did you really want to do?
I really wanted to be an editor at that point. I haven't been in college for a long time myself, so I don't quite know. But this is what worked for me. You can get all the formal internships you want. You can get all the fellowships you want. Those will be good for your resume. But I promise you that the things that you will find most valuable in the long term are the times when, number one, you found a mentor and worked as closely with that mentor as you could, crawled on your belly to go and like worship at their feet until their wisdom like osmosis itself into you, right? And on the other end of that mentorship wound up having like a guide through life on that, right? And number two, when you set off on your own to go build something new, like a blogging project or like a new nonprofit doing something nobody else is doing. Sometimes I've known people who right out of college ran for office and sometimes even won, or some people started a business. So like early on while you're in college, get as many experiences as you can.
Mm-hmm.
But the more mentors you find and the more things you start, the more effective things will be for you. So you mentioned the campaign. I took a trip up to the Hoover Institution in Northern California to talk to a California editor named Bill Whalen. And I told him all the kind of wacko, centrist, independent stuff that I was interested in at that point. And he like looked at me weird and said, you should probably talk to Duff Sondheim. So I emailed a guy named Duff Sondheim. He was running for the California Senate seat that had just been vacated by Barbara Boxer. And one of the other candidates for that seat happened to be California Attorney General Kamala Harris. And so in the 2016 California campaign for the Senate, I basically got to drive one of the California Republican nominees all over California, watch him hold crowds and lose crowds at rallies for both Republicans and for Democrats, drive him into meetings with people whose shadowy kind of smoke-filled rooms vibes were things I had never seen or understood before. I'd only read about them. And it was great. I think there are a few better things you can do when you're a young person, particularly in college, than work for a really, really uphill, forlorn hope cause, whether that's a political campaign or some kind of nonprofit work or something that you don't really have guarantee is going to win. Because when you do that, not only do you get more responsibility and learn more about what's happening, but more importantly, you learn what it's like to fight for a cause, whether it's going to win or lose, because it's the right thing to do. The other thing that you mentioned was the editorial intern. One of those magazines that I had been reading that influenced my thought a lot on international relations was called The American Interest, rest in peace. The American Interest was chaired by a guy you guys might have heard of named Francis Fukuyama, the famous ender of history. Read his works a little bit more carefully. They're more subtle than you think. The editor of The American Interest was a guy named Adam Garfinkel, who had been a longtime foreign policy hand and remains to this day the single most high brain power individual I have ever met. I had read a couple of his pieces on both foreign and domestic policy, decided I wanted to be just like him. And when I secured the internship randomly, this was back when there's a lot of unpaid internships in DC where you can just like email people and they'll say, yeah, sure, come sit in the office 3 days a week and we'll find something to do with you. And I got to do some editorial work for The American Interest, got to do some blogging, and asked Adam Garfinkel if he would teach me everything he knew so that I could be wise like him. And he did. And I don't think I have become wise like him, but I think the only reason I ever learned how to think and ever learned how to write and ever learned how to attain my own internal standard of excellence in writing was because of that mentorship. And I still talk to him every once in a while now these days. He's become a kind of not a cranky old man, but like an intellectual figure who has lost a lot of faith in the world, but still knows exactly how the world that just passed works. And if you can find somebody like that, you will like have no shortage of ways to think about things that are happening crazily new these days. But Adam Garfinkel was my pathway into journalism. And between Adam Garfinkel and journalism and Duff Sondheim and politics, I think I did pretty well getting into some first things. You asked me what I wanted to do right after I got out of college. I moved back to DC to come live in my parents' basement and find a job. And I thought I was going to be some kind of hotshot, everybody wants to hire me editor or policy advisor for somebody in government work. And I passed my resume around and nobody would hire me. I got really depressed. My mom told me to just go find some job, any job. And I, in my grief and resentment, went and sent my resume into the Hamilton restaurant right next to the White House in downtown DC. And they accepted me. And I worked long, dark night shifts there as a host for several years. I learned that if you really want to serve the American people, you should plan to serve the American people and see if you still want to do it at the other end of that. The other thing that happened on that is I started working for a little organization as a volunteer that at that point was called Better Angels. And Better Angels was a piece I had found both through California politics and through interning in DC journalism, whose whole shtick was you can have your different politics. You should have your different politics. You are never going to find common ground. You are never going to agree with each other on everything, on anything at all. But you are family. You are friends. And you shouldn't let political issues over which you don't have very much control take away your closest relationships with your family and friends. Civil discourse, but in a deeper, more spiritual level. So I saw all that and I was like, my friend would be interested in this, but I don't know, being nice to liberals, this sounds really dumb. So I'll maybe be around it, but not be in it. And then the group there asked me to go do some editing work for them. And I thought, well, that's more policy work than I'm doing now. One thing led to another, and they asked me to represent them in DC, and they asked me to train with their debate program. And by middle of 2019, I was doing a lot of that kind of work. I never thought I would be doing civil discourse work, but it wound up being one of the most important things I ever did.
You called it depol work. Do people use that term?
Oh my gosh, did I actually have that on my website? You know what? I'll keep it on my website.
No. You said it in a podcast one time. I don't know if people actually say that though.
Here's the truth. I know. Okay, if you're in a small enough community, you can just kind of make up lingo, and if it sounds true enough, other people will start saying it. The correct term is depolarization. As you can hear, depolarization, which is the unconditional reconciliation of people in ways that like decreases their polarization and their contempt and resentment of each other. Depolarization as a term sounds like a medical procedure, you know. And back in the old days, we were always going back and forth and like, how can we come up with a better term for this? And everybody kept coming up with stuff that is it's vaguely the same, but it's not quite it, you know. So eventually, I just got annoyed with all of that, and I started like casually telling people, "Hey, we could just like do what people in government do and like come up with a shorthand for it. Depol. Has anybody ever said depol? No." And so like we started saying depol, and more people than I thought would caught onto it. So some people in Braver Angels still say it. I've met a couple people who somehow heard it elsewhere in the depol space. So yeah, feel free. We made it a thing. I want it to be kept a thing.
You were on a podcast called The Outrage Overload about a year ago, and you said depolarization work is a species of social work and not a species of political work. Can you expand on the specifics of the work?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So depolarization work, the way it's practiced by Braver Angels and the way it's practiced by a lot of other great organizations in the Listen First Coalition and in the broader space, there's a group called Bridge USA that does it, is always work that is meant to encourage people through a variety of ways to drop the contempt that they have at other people and the disgust they have at other people, and sometimes the hatred they have against other people on the basis of politics, right? Feel free to hate each other personally, just don't hate each other over politics, you know? And you want to figure out ways to use practices that help people like each other more and protect their personal relationships more, to help people have their politics, but not let their political differences hurt their personal relationships and their friendships and their marriages and all that. And let me tell you, this is the hardest work I have ever done in my life. It is comparatively easy to find common ground with people on immigration, even if they are the kind of people who would genuinely be racist against each other on Twitter, right? Or in real life. It is easier to help them find policy common ground than it is to help them, if they are related to each other, to not hate each other. And it is especially hard to do that in yourself. I'll admit real hard right now, I have felt myself getting very, very polarized against a lot of people in a lot of different places on the basis of politics alone. I have found myself recently getting angry at very close, very old friends of mine on the basis of politics alone, and my thought that that politics has effects on their character, right? And like, that is exactly what organizations like Braver Angels try to help you not do. So what is that way that it helps? Basically, there's a couple ways that you can do it. I think the fundamental end goal of all of these is what I call the personal defeat of political hatred, right? If you can defeat in yourself hating somebody over politics, and they can defeat their own hatred at you over politics, then you've won. You haven't won politics, but you've protected something that is, I think, more important than anything you could possibly do in victory, you know? And you can do that a lot of ways. You can have a question of like getting to know each other and see what you appreciate about each other other than politics. And then once you trust each other, learn from their mouth why they believe what they believe. And then they learn from your mouth why you believe what you believe. And that makes their ideas a little bit less crazy once you know them. They might still be crazy, but they're not as evil as you might have thought. Another one, my favorite one, is the debates method, right? Where you create an environment where everybody can feel completely safe and completely heard. And that's the important thing. It has to be both. And when you have that environment, you can have people go say exactly what they believe, trusting that everybody will hear them even if they don't understand them, and that they'll get a fair shake to do that. So the Braver Angels debates program that my dear friend and colleague April Lawson built was based incredibly off of that. It requires a couple kind of arcane feeling rules, like you can only address other people in the third person, and you can only address the moderator, the chair of that debate, in the first person, stuff like that. But there are strategies you can use. There are tactics that you can use when you're building this kind of workshop method or this debate method that change the way people interact with each other. And when you change the way people interact with each other, you can change the experience that they have with each other without them having to change anything specific about what they do. You asked why this is thought about as social work rather than political work. There's a very specific reason for that, is we're not trying to change anybody's politics. We're trying to change people's feelings towards each other over politics. And we're not trying to get anything specific passed. I know there's organizations that do want to get something specific done on requiring members of Congress to room with people from their opposite party, or ranked choice voting, I guess, or like changes in how the media environment is required to cover things, or whatever. All those may well be good things, but those are fundamentally political ends. That might have some good impact. They might not have some good impact. Nobody knows. But what you can have good impact on is helping people at a one-off basis, and then slowly at a community basis, and then maybe even more than that, realize that they don't have to hate each other. And again, just look around you in America today. Look at what happened on the news in the last couple of days. Don't even look primarily at what the event was, but look at how people reacted to that event and talk to them hard. And you see the political hatred spiraling all around us. That's what depol work hits at. And that's why I think it is the hardest work that anybody can ever do.
We're actually recording this on January 9th. So, the news cycle lately. But regarding that, what advice would you give to people in the 8th District and beyond who are feeling overwhelmed by the increasing political polarization right now?
I would say just look around you. Not on the internet. Don't look around you on the internet. That's one of the worst places you can do. I don't believe that the internet is the cause of polarization the way a lot of people I know do, but I do know it really doesn't help. I mean, that's where I get polarized mostly nowadays too. But look at your neighbors. Look at the people who are shopping with you in the grocery market. Look at the people who are at the party that your cousin invited you to, And it's not as much that they all share something in common with each other and share in common with you or anything like that. It's that everybody has a normal life. It's that everybody has things that they care about that have nothing to do with politics, just like you do. Their politics emerges from their experience. Everybody's politics emerges from their experience. My politics emerges from my experience just as yours does, Serena. Some of us think more cerebrally and unhelpfully about it, but it ultimately comes out of where people are from. In all senses of that word. And if you can go back to that and remember that politics is important, politics is life and death, politics establishes a lot of the basis and framework of everything that we live in. And the people who do it have a solemn responsibility to be better than their lowest, darkest versions of themselves, right? But there is a world beyond politics, and just look at the world beyond politics around you, and that should give you some faith that not all of it is this bad, right? I guess the second thing, and this is, this is something that inspires me. I hope eventually it inspires other people more too. This is the 250th anniversary of the United States of America. 250 years is a lot of time. It's also a really short time too. And there's a lot of ways that even though a lot of things here feel decrepit and a lot of things here feel unsolvable and it looks like everything is decaying, both the physical world and the politics we have and the culture we have, maybe in some ways, America is still young. America is still young. We are governed in a way that maybe is not particularly creative. We're governed by people who I think are not always thinking the most proactively and futuristically. I think part of that is because they have given their service to America over the last several decades, but now their time is up and it's time we have a new generation of leaders emerge, right? To come up with new ideas from the experiences we had. And if nothing else gives you faith, I hope it will give you faith that I'm not the only 32-year-old running for a position in the American government. There's a lot of people who are younger than me and about your age, Serena, who have genuine idealistic convictions about what America could be and should be. I hate to be trite, I hate to be cheesy about it, but it's true. And I meet them whenever I go talk to a group of college kids. I meet them whenever I'm on some unhinged internet forum and I see the one person who's standing against the crowd. There are people who want to serve their country. America is young. And here in the 8th District, here in the whole ecosystem that is Northern Virginia, everybody who comes here to, in some way, serve their country. It's the federal workers, it's the military personnel. It's all the people who work in journalism, law, government affairs, policy advocacy, you name it, who come here to fight for a very specific thing that's a cause higher than themselves. And it's the idealistic young people like you and like your fellow students at GMU and everybody who will be here for the summer to go do an internship on Capitol Hill or for some small magazine nobody's heard of. People come here because they want to serve. And if the country was really about to fall apart, people wouldn't be coming here believing in something. Those are two different kinds of look around. One of them's at the people in a mundane, everyday life sense. The other one is just look at things in the bigger picture. And if you don't, then it's very easy to lose faith. There are people who are trying to give you hope. And I think that's what a lot of this year is about.
Conservation, it's a key part of your platform. Why?
I wouldn't be running for Congress if I weren't worried about the national park system, the U.S. Forest Service system, and the public lands and historic heritage in general. I want to make clear right off at the outset that even though that's why I'm running at a personal level, that is not, at the end of the day, why I'm running for the people here. Conservation is the thing that became the fire bell in the night that, set off all of my alarm bells and pushed me into this. There are a lot of things here, from the perennial defense policy and defense spending questions to the fact that a lot of our federal workers have been laid off and our system of government and the bureaucracy is getting more dysfunctional and needs to be seriously rethought. And most importantly of all, affordability on everything from energy to housing to power and water, to basic goods and foodstuffs, you name it. I know that those are the things that matter here. And those are things that I have some thoughts about, and I'm trying to hear a lot of other people's thoughts about. And we'll talk about those. But that's what this campaign on the ground really is about. And I had really I toyed around with the idea of running for Congress for many years, but always kind of was well, that'd be something that would be kind of a waste of time for me. And there's better ways I can help the causes that I like. The reason why I stopped thinking that this year and decided to throw my hat in the ring in a way that I never have before like this was because I saw a great threat to the places that I love coming out of my own party. I saw my fellow Republicans backing proposals to go cut the budget of the National Park Service and fire a lot of park rangers at places like Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania Battlefields National Historic Park, Lewis and Clark National Historical Park, the battlefields of the Civil War, a lot of the forts out west, a lot of places even around here in D.C. that people don't realize are National Park Service, right? Arlington National Cemetery is one of those. Frederick Douglass's house is right across the Anacostia River from main downtown D.C. That's National Park Service. The White House area and the National Mall, those are all National Park Service. That's why you see rangers down there. I saw my party, which if we do anything right, we are a party for the American heritage, going and trying to deconstruct the agency that stewards more of the American heritage than any other agency in the federal government and any other single entity in America. It's not just Yosemite and Yellowstone and Olympic, even though those are places that I love too. The other thing too is that there was a proposal that you probably saw by Senator Lee and Senator Daines to go mandate the sale of a lot of land run by the National Forests, by the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management. And I looked at the map that the Wilderness Society had forecasted on that, and I saw that every single... I'm an outdoorsman, okay? I go out west every summer to go climb mountains. I love it. It's one of the things that I love to do with my life. And I saw every single mountain that I've climbed in the last 5 years. Most of the places I have hiked but not climbed was either on land that was going to be openable for sale or directly adjacent to it in another national park nearby. And that just was okay, now this is personal. So I have a lot of friends. I used to work at a scout camp called Philmont Scout Ranch, and a lot of people out there from the Conservation Department have gone into the U.S. Forest Service. I also have other friends from scouting who've gone to become national park rangers doing history stuff. And as I reflected on what was happening to them and what was happening to the places that they worked and places that I've had some of the best memories of my life, I realized I have to do something. Now, in terms of what that means on policy, It's pretty straightforward. There are ways that we have managed the national parks and the national forests and BLM land and the national wildlife refuges that work pretty well. And the people who have managed them, the forest rangers, the game wardens, the park rangers, always are kind of working to adjust those. The Forest Service and BLM land has what they call multiple use sustained yield policy. So they uh, balance the amount of resource extraction with different kinds of areas set aside for recreation and preservation of the habitat, right? National parks are all about preserving the landscape, maintaining it preserved, and getting a certain kind of visitation level that works best. For all these things, you need staff. For all these things, you need money. For all these things, you need to have regulatory codes and agency leeway that helps with the management of that land best. When you cut those out and when you stop placing a value on these for their own sake, you start to go down a very long, dark road that eventually results in people starting to see these lands. And by the way, that's a map of America's public lands right there, as dollar signs, you know? And I strongly, strongly believe, and this is why at the end of the day I'm conservative, that a civilization that does not take the things that have been handed down to it and keep them, protect them, respect them, and make them a little bit better for the next generation, the people who will come after them, uh, and then hand them off when our turn has done. A civilization that does not do that, that just plunders and lets things go to rot and doesn't care that it was given something great and doesn't bother to give it to its children, that civilization is not worthy of the name of civilization. I think almost all the things that are best about America happened on the American land, in the American nature, and are protected by those agencies that not only steward our environment, but also steward the historic heritage and help generations of young people, every generation, learn more and feel more and all of that. And those were things that were given to me as a kid, and I don't want them to be taken from my kids and grandkids. Another kind of final thing is that everything that I just told you, and I know it sounds like kind of Loraxy and whatever, but I believe it. That's all in the ethic of stewardship, right? You talk to any good conservationist, and whether they are really, really pro preservation and don't ever cut down any trees, or whether they're like very pro, we need to harvest trees at a sustainable level and also set some aside for not, but otherwise keep them in a way that we can make money off of them, but also keep the landscape beautiful and keep fires from destroying everything, right? Those are two conservation ethics, and conservation fundamentally boils down to the ethic of stewardship. And stewardship, I just told you how it works on public land management. I think that's also the attitude that people in government at their best have. The idea that you have a duty to something higher than yourself. That is something that you didn't invent, you didn't create it, somebody handed it down to you. It doesn't serve you, it serves the public. And you have a job, and your job is to keep that system going, make it a little bit better, so that the next generations of public servants after you will be able to keep serving the public, even maybe in better ways than you were able to in your own time. And the people who are my greatest political heroes, I said John McCain, Robert Gates, and John Huntsman, I think they lived that ethic of stewardship in everything that they ever did in politics. They got a lot of stuff wrong on policy, but the kind of bipartisan style and the sense of loyalty to the institutions of America is something that I think everybody should take very seriously. And I see that most by the park rangers and the forest rangers and the game wardens in our public land system. And I want our politicians to live that ethos too.
So, Virginia's 8th district is widely regarded as strongly Democratic. As we know, how do you plan to engage with voters in the district?
I mean, for what it's worth, I've spent my whole career talking to Democrats. I was one of a few token conservatives in what was once a very, very liberal civil discourse organization, Braver Angels, right? I, once upon a time, was a quiet conservative on a college campus that was very liberal. And so, I've done this enough kind of habitually over the years that I don't really think it's any problem at all, I talk to Democrats all the time. I learn from Democrats all the time. I even agree with Democrats on some very key things. And so you ask, like, how am I going to go about engaging with Democrats? I'm just going to talk with them. I'm actually really excited to go around to more of the more of the events that happen in the district, both at a nonpartisan level and at partisan levels. I've gone and hung out at some Republican clubs, and I'm going to some county and city meetings sometime soon. And at the end of the day, like, people like to hear what you have to say, but people also like to talk too. And I found that whenever I ask people what matters to them most, and try to listen to them as best as I can, it's the best kind of engagement. In some ways, because I don't have to talk as much, but also because there really, really is a lot that everybody brings to the table. I guess another thing too here is that, like, from everything that you hear me say, like, you can probably tell, I'm a Republican. I've always been a Republican. I always will be a Republican. I think there are parts of my party that are on a very, very wrong track. And part of it is what that does to America. A bigger, more important part of it to me, honestly, is what it's doing to themselves. I really sincerely believe that we all have the responsibility to try to be the best possible version of ourselves, especially if we would pretend to have any right to take public responsibility, right? I want my fellow Republicans to be better Republicans, and they don't have to agree with me on everything. But I think I want to uh, get to a level of discourse in my own party that we can be more productive for America than we are right now. And there are a lot of Republicans who agree with me. There are a lot of Republicans who want this too. There are a lot of Republicans who actually have been very vocal about it, but they don't get heard enough. There's even more Republicans who are very quiet about it because, number one, they're used to being afraid of Democrats finding out they're Republican, and now they're also just disillusioned with their own party and don't really want to have to deal with that. I want to help bring those people out. Okay. And I don't know if they're as prolific around here in the 8th District as Democrats are. I think they have a lot in common with Democrats, and I think Democrats have a lot in common with them. I don't really see this as anything different than anything that I've ever done for my whole life. It will probably be a little bit more awkward and scary sometimes, but I think when you focus on the fact that people want something that they can believe in, want something reasonable, and want something that gives them a hope in a future, not just a kind of regret about a past. That's what I want to do. And all the successful candidates I've seen who are in my generation have done something like that, no matter which part of the party aisle they were coming from. And I think that's something that the people here deserve a lot. The incumbent has spent many, 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 many years in public service doing good work for people. And we all, me and the other candidates here, we all respect him for that. I don't think the incumbent has a deep sense of what that means in the coming political era. I don't think most people who've been in government that long really have a sense of how things are changing. And I think we owe it to the people here who spend all their time serving their country and who, like George Washington in 1775, crossed the Potomac to go serve their country and then come back home afterwards. They deserve a better kind of leadership. They deserve a better kind of government. And that's what we're trying to do here.
How do you plan to engage with the younger people?
I'm really, really excited to bother political science professors and college political clubs folks at Mason, and then also probably at GW and Georgetown and some of the other schools in DC. Probably, honestly, some of the other out of DC university programs too. That have DC offices, just because, whenever, and this is not me trying to flatter you, okay? Every time I do a thing with college students, I'm always impressed. And it's weird, but literally always, because you guys are idealistic in ways that I think a lot of young professionals start off idealistic, but kind of taper off over time. I'm also surprised how smart you guys are, because I was not quite that smart at that time. I want to try to get a better sense of you guys' generation, because I have younger friends, but I always keep realizing that I'm a millennial who is just barely out of the frame of genuinely being able to understand younger Zoomers. I guess the last thing is I am really, really excited to get our social media set up at a much, much, much more proactive level than I think most campaigns here have done for a while. A lot of young folks who've run for office, most recently Zoran Mamdani, have done really, really cool work with social media. And it's just exciting to see that that's something that 15 years ago, 17 years ago, when Barack Obama was first running for president, everybody was like, social media is going to transform the political game. they were right. They weren't right in all the ways that they thought they were going to be right, but they were right. And as somebody who's grown up in a social media world, everybody in my generation does it. Everybody in your generation does it. A lot of people in the older generations than us do it, but the young people do it too. And so I'm excited to do that. I guess lastly, there's a lot of talented high school students around here. Thomas Jefferson High School down in further south in this area is one of the best high schools in the country. And there's a lot of other really good ones too. And the folks who are not yet eligible to vote, but who are on the cusp of having long careers in whatever field they're going to go into, are getting smarter now. I mean, we still have a lot of excellent people in our younger generations. And I want to hear from them what worries them about the future. I was a high school student once. You were much more recently than I was. And there are things to be learned from the teenagers and the children as well.